Imagine winning a war without ever stepping onto the battlefield. Imagine breaking the will of your enemy before the first arrow is loosed or the first cannon is fired. Over 2,500 years ago, a Chinese general named Sun Tzu wrote a book so powerful, so enduring, that it's still studied today not just by soldiers, but by CEOs, politicians, and even professional athletes. The art of war is not about brutality. It's about mastery. And throughout history, leaders from Napoleon to Eisenhower, from Mao Zedong to Norman Schwarzkopf, have drawn upon Sun Tzu's principles to outthink, outmaneuver, and ultimately outlast their opponents. Today, we will break down these ancient strategies and show you exactly how they shape the outcomes of history's greatest battles and why they still matter to you. Right now, the mind behind the masterpiece Sun Tzu, or Sun Tzu, lived during the late spring and autumn period of Chinese history, roughly between 544 and 496 BC. Though historians debate the exact details of his life, the influence of his work is indisputable. Military historian Ralph D. Sawyer, in his translation of The Art of War, writes, "No other work has been so highly esteemed in so many different fields. The lessons of Sun Tzu cross the boundaries of time, culture, and profession. His 13 concise chapters address preparation, deception, leadership, adaptability, and the psychological aspects of conflict. This was revolutionary for his era, when warfare was often seen as brute force and numbers." One of Sun Tzu's most quoted lines is, "All warfare is based on deception." It is not about lying for the sake of dishonor, it is about using the enemy as assumptions against them. Centuries later, this principle would be vividly demonstrated during Operation Fortitude in 1944, when the Allies created an elaborate deception to convince Hitler that the D-Day invasion would occur at Pas-de-Calais instead of Normandy. Inflatable tanks, fake radio transmissions, and a phantom army commanded by General Patton misled the German High Command, ensuring the real landing faced significantly less resistance. Sun Tzu would have smiled at such precision in psychological manipulation. Know yourself and your enemy. Perhaps the most famous lesson from the art of war is, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. This concept isn't just about intelligence gathering. It's about a deep understanding of strengths, weaknesses, and intentions. The Vietnam War offers a grim reminder of what happens when this principle is ignored. Historian Andrew F. Krapinovich in The Army and Vietnam argues that the U.S. military misunderstood the nature of the conflict, treating it as a conventional war when it was fundamentally a political and guerrilla struggle. The Viet Cong and North Vietnamese army exploited this misunderstanding, using terrain, population support, and political endurance as weapons. In contrast, General Vo Nguyen Giap, who openly acknowledged reading Sun Tzu, focused on eroding American public support, recognizing that victory in modern times often depends as much on perception as on physical control of territory. In the American Civil War, General Robert E. Lee understood this principle well during the Chancellorsville Campaign in 1863. Facing a larger Union force, he divided his army in the face of the enemy, a move that would normally be considered suicidal because he knew his opponent, General Joseph Hooker, was overly cautious. Lee's gamble paid off, delivering one of his most brilliant victories. "Strike where the enemy is unprepared," Sun Tzu wrote. "Attack him where he is unprepared. Appear where you are not expected." Hannibal Barca's campaign against Rome during the Second Punic War is a brilliant example. In 218 BC, instead of taking the predictable route across the Mediterranean, Hannibal led his army, including war elephants, over the snow-covered Alps. Roman historian Livy recounts the sheer disbelief of the Roman Senate upon hearing of Hannibal's approach from the north, a move so audacious it threw Rome's entire defense strategy into disarray. Similarly, in the Gulf War of 1991, General Norman Schwarzkopf used what became known as the left hook maneuver, feigning a direct frontal assault while swinging the bulk of coalition forces far to the west, striking deep into Iraqi defenses where they were weakest. Schwarzkopf himself acknowledged that the principle echoed Sun Tzu's teachings, proving that even in the age of satellites and precision bombs, ancient wisdom still had teeth. The same principle was applied in 1940 when German forces bypassed the heavily fortified Maginot Line by invading France through the Ardennes forest terrain the French believed impassable to tanks. Historian Alistair Horn, in Toulouse Battle, notes that the stroke of strategic surprise shattered French defenses in weeks. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. This is perhaps Sun Tzu's most profound idea of victory without battle. In 1805, Napoleon Bonaparte executed this at the Battle of Ulm without a full-scale confrontation. Through rapid maneuvering and encirclement, Napoleon forced an Austrian army of 30,000 to surrender without significant fighting. In the 20th century, the Cold War itself was a colossal application of this principle. The U.S. and the Soviet Union, though armed to the teeth, avoided direct conflict while engaging in a long game of influence, economic pressure, espionage, and proxy wars. Former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger once remarked, in the nuclear age, Sun Tzu's concept of winning without fighting is not just elegant, it is essential. Even in sports, coaches have adapted this thinking. Legendary NFL coach Bill Belichick, known for exhaustive preparation, often wins games by neutralizing an opponent's best weapon before the contest even begins, a tactical mindset straight out of Sun Tzu. Adaptability Water Shapes ITS course, Sun Tzu taught that military strategy should be as fluid as water, adapting to the shape of the battlefield. The Israeli victory in the Six-Day War of 1967 is a modern embodiment of this. Facing numerically superior Arab forces on multiple fronts, Israel's leaders, including General Moshe Dayan, implemented preemptive strikes and rapid redeployment. Historian Michael B. Oren, in 6 Days of War, notes how Israeli strategy constantly evolved over the course of the conflict, never allowing the enemy to dictate the tempo. This adaptability is not just a battlefield tactic, it's a mindset. Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander in World War II, famously said, "In preparing for battle, I have always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable." That statement could have come straight from Sun Tzu's pen. In World War I, German General Erich von Falkenhayn failed to adapt during the Battle of Verdun, resulting in massive casualties without strategic gain. On the other hand, the Allied success in the Normandy breakout in 1944 came precisely because commanders like Omar Bradley shifted tactics rapidly when initial plans stalled. History is not just about the past, it's about understanding the principles that shape the future. If you've ever wondered how the world's greatest generals thought, why some armies shattered against impossible odds while others emerged victorious, then stick with us. And if you're passionate about military history, strategy, and the art of thinking like a commander, hit that subscribe button right now. Join our ranks because every week we bring you the stories, lessons, and tactics that forged the world we live in today, morale and leadership. Sun Tzu insisted that leadership was the cornerstone of victory. Regard your soldiers as your children, and they will follow you into the deepest valleys. Look on them as your own beloved sons, and they will stand by you even unto death. Alexander the Great embodied this principle. Historian Robin Lane Fox describes how Alexander ate the same rations as his men, marched alongside them, and shared in their hardships during campaigns. This personal connection inspired unmatched loyalty, enabling him to lead his army thousands of miles from home and still keep morale intact. In contrast, leaders who neglected their soldiers' welfare often faced disaster. The collapse of the French army in 1940 was not solely due to German blitzkrieg tactics morale. and poor leadership played their part. Sun Tzu's warning that when the general is weak and without authority, when his orders are not clear and distinct, the army is in disorder was written millennia earlier, yet proved timeless. George S. Patton understood the psychological side of leadership. His bold speeches, strict discipline, and constant presence on the front lines in World War II turned him into a living symbol of aggression and confidence, boosting his troops' fighting spirit. Logistics, the unsung hero Sun Tzu understood that battles are won not only with swords, but with supplies. The line between disorder and order lies in logistics. Napoleon, for all his genius, learned this the hard way during his 1812 invasion of Russia. Lacking adequate provisions and facing the Russian scorched earth policy, his grand army collapsed in the brutal winter, losing over 400,000 men. By contrast, in World War II, the Allied victory in Europe was as much a triumph of logistics as it was of strategy. Historian Stephen Ambrose, in D-Day, June 6, 1944, highlights the massive coordination required to supply the Normandy invasion from landing craft to fuel pipelines under the English Channel. Without mastery of logistics, even the most brilliant battle plan crumbles. The Mongol Empire under Genghis Khan also proved this point. Their ability to move armies across vast distances depended on carefully managed supply chains, remount horses, and pre-established routes of resupply logistical innovations that allowed them to dominate from China to Europe. The enduring legacy of Sun Tzu, from ancient Chinese battlefields to modern corporate boardrooms, Sun Tzu's influence endures. Douglas MacArthur carried a copy of The Art of War during his campaigns in the Pacific. Mao Zedong cited it as a foundation for his guerrilla tactics. Even in the 21st century, military academies worldwide require its study. As historian Bevan Alexander writes in How Wars Are Won, Sun Tzu remains as relevant to the commander in the digital age as he was to the warlord in the age of the chariot. His genius was not in predicting technology, but in understanding human nature, ambition, fear, pride, and the fragile balance of power. A timeless battlefield. The battlefield has changed. Swords have become drones, messengers have become satellites, and chariots have given way to tanks. But the human mind, the true arena of war, remains the same. Sun Tzu's words echo across centuries because they speak to something deeper than tactics. They speak to the psychology of victory. Remember his warning. Victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. If you understand that, you've already taken your first step toward mastering the art of war.